All right, let's dive into The Godfather. One of those films you just gotta talk about. We're gonna figure out what makes this movie more than just another gangster story. What makes it so captivating after all these years? And luckily, you brought some really insightful analysis for us to unpack.
Yeah, right off the bat, this analysis frames The Godfather as, get this, a Shakespearean tragedy. Might sound a bit out there, but when you think about it.
It definitely caught my eye, that's for sure. So how does it fit into that whole tragedy mold, like Shakespeare?
Well, you've got your classic tragic elements, right? A hero with a fatal flaw, this sense that things are just going to go wrong, a fall from grace. Michael Corleone, at first, he wants nothing to do with the family business, but he gets sucked in, and every choice he makes, driven by loyalty and ambition, it just leads him down a path of no return. It's that classic struggle against fate,
And the source, it breaks the whole movie down, act by act, starting with that wedding scene, the one, introduces the whole Corleone family, everyone's there. And Don Vito, Brando, he's just magnetic, that quiet power.
That opening scene, it's so important. Sets up the family, their whole code, the difference between how they act around outsiders and that darkness underneath. And remember, at this point, Michael's the outsider, the war hero, seems totally removed from the family business.
Right. But then Soloza shows up with his drug deal. Things start to get a little dicey. Don Vito, even though there's a lot of money to be made, he says no. He knows what that kind of business would bring. Kind of feels like that's where the tragedy really starts, right?
Oh, absolutely. Vito refusing, it sets up a whole chain reaction that ends up forcing Michael's hand. Someone tries to kill Vito and everything goes haywire, and that violence, it forces Michael into the world he tried so hard to avoid.
Yeah, and Vito's hurt, so Sonny, impulsive Sonny, he takes up, but it's Michael who ends up stepping up because of that family duty. That scene in the restaurant where he takes out Sollozzo and that crooked cop, it changes Michael, it's like a turning point.
And the way it's filmed, all that tension, the slow buildup to the violence.
Yeah.
It's terrifying, but you can't look away. Michael crosses a line, and you just know there's no going back for him.
And, the analysis points out that the film doesn't glorify the violence. It's used carefully, sparingly. Mm-hmm. But when it happens, man, it's brutal. You feel it.
Exactly. Coppola, the director, he's very deliberate with those violent scenes. Think about Sonny's death at the toll booth. It's shocking, it's graphic, and it shows that vicious cycle of violence that the Corleones can't escape.
Yeah, and while Michael's hiding out in Sicily, things just get worse and worse. Then you have Sonny's death, just brutal, really shows the price they pay for power, the consequences.
And then Michael comes back, marries Kay, promises her a clean, legitimate future. But as you're watching, you start to see the cracks, right?
Yeah.
He's not that war hero anymore. He's becoming something else, something ruthless.
Yeah, and then Vito dies, and Michael takes on the mantle, the Godfather. And that baptism scene, man, well, he's the godfather to his nephew. He's orchestrating all these hits. It's such a powerful contrast.
Masterful scene, visually and thematically. It shows how Michael's two sides, the ruthless side and the family man, all mixed up. It also highlights Coppola's symbolism, especially the oranges. They keep showing up.
The oranges, yeah, the analysis mentioned that. It was really interesting. What's the deal with the oranges? What do they mean?
Well, the analysis points out that oranges often pop up right before someone dies if there's a betrayal. Mm-hmm. It's subtle, adds this layer of foreshadowing, makes you uneasy. Like when Vito gets shot, he just bought oranges, and Sonny's assassination happens near a billboard with oranges on it.
Wow, it makes you realize how much thought went into every little thing in the film. It's not just random, there's a visual language, like you said.
Exactly. Coppola crafted this world meticulously. The oranges are just one example. They create this sense of dread, like something bad's about to happen.
And let's not forget the acting, it's unforgettable. The source really praises the performances, especially Marlon Brando as Don Vito.
Brando, he was revolutionary. The gravitas he brought, the vulnerability, it changed how we saw gangsters. Vito wasn't just a bad guy, he was complex, even sympathetic in a way. Very different from the typical gangster villain.
And Al Pacino as Michael, his transformation throughout the film, it's just as captivating.
Oh yeah, Pacino embodies that shift from idealist to hardened leader perfectly. Mm-hmm. It's nuanced, heartbreaking. You see Michael's soul getting chipped away as power corrupts him.
And it's not just them. The whole cast is phenomenal. James Kelly as Sonny, all that fire. Robert Duvall, Tom Hagen, so calm and collected. Each performance adds so much depth to the story.
Yeah, they feel like a real family. All the love, the loyalty, the tension, that's what drives this story. And Coppola's direction, it brings those performances to life.
The analysis mentions that too. The lighting, the shadows, the pacing, it creates such a unique atmosphere.
Coppola, he balances the epic scope with these really intimate moments masterfully. The low lighting, the close-ups, you're right there with the Corleones, you see their secrets, their struggles.
Okay, now let's get into the analysis section of the source. This is where it gets really interesting.
I'm ready. Now we're going to see what The Godfather is really all about, its deeper themes. So the analysis really digs into Michael's transformation. You know, they see him as a classic tragic hero. And there's this one quote that sums it all up. Just when I thought I was out, they pull me back in.
Yeah, powerful line. Gets right to the heart of what Michael's going through. He tries so hard to resist, to build a life outside the family, but he always gets dragged back in.
It's like he's trapped by fate, by his family, their expectations. He might have wanted something different, but in the end, he can't escape his past. It's his legacy.
Yeah, it all goes back to that Shakespearean tragedy idea we talked about, right? Like, it was inevitable.
Exactly. Like a lot of tragic heroes, Michael's downfall, it comes from the choices he makes. But those choices, they're shaped by things outside his control, It makes you think, how much free will do we really have versus destiny?
The analysis also talks about how the film handles violence, which is interesting. It's not like over the top or trying to be shocking. It's more like there's a purpose to it. It happens at specific times, almost like in an opera.
Right, the violence in The Godfather, It's never just there for no reason. It shows you how brutal their world is, the consequences of every action. It's all about the high stakes.
Like Sonny's death at the toll booth, that's a good example. It's sudden, it's violent, and it really drives home that whole revenge cycle they're caught in and how dangerous it is to be impulsive.
And then there's the baptism scene. All those murders happening while Michael's standing there as the Godfather. It's chilling. It shows how Michael can be two things at once. A ruthless killer and a family man.
Yeah, that duality. And going back to the oranges for a second, it's amazing how something so small can foreshadow such dark events.
Right. It's one of the ways Coppola keeps you on edge throughout the film. Like, danger could be anywhere. Even everyday things can have a deeper meaning, a hidden message. The oranges are like a warning sign.
And speaking of warnings, the family dynamics in the film, they're so complex. The analysis really goes into that tension between family and business. Like, which one comes first?
Yeah, it's like, on the one hand, family's everything, loyalty above all else. But then there's the reality of their business, where being soft can get you killed.
And you see that play out again and again. Betrayals, power struggles, sacrifices they make for family. It's like they're constantly trying to balance on a tightrope.
And Michael, as he becomes more powerful, he feels that conflict more than anyone. He does some pretty ruthless things, but he believes he has to protect his family. It's a tragedy for him and for the whole family.
Now, the analysis does point out some criticisms of the film. Things like the pacing, the way women are portrayed, and maybe even romanticizing the mafia a bit.
Yeah, those are all valid points. Like the pacing, it might feel slow to some people today, used to fast-paced movies, but that slowness, it gives you time to get to know the characters, to build the tension, to get lost in that world.
And the way women are portrayed, it reflects the times the film was made in, but it also raises some questions, like how do women survive in a man's world, especially in a structure like the mafia?
Okay, Michael's wife, she's a good example of that. She's drawn to Michael, to the idea of family, but then she sees all the violence, the corruption, and she starts to have doubts.
And the whole romanticizing the mafia thing, well, the film definitely doesn't hide how brutal they are, but it also shows their code of honor, their loyalty, and that might come across as romantic to some people.
Yeah, it's a tough one. It's up to each viewer to decide how they feel about that. But one thing's for sure, The Godfather got people talking. It changed the game. And its impact is still felt today.
Right. And speaking of impact, the source talks about how influential the film has been, winning awards, inspiring other gangster movies and TV shows like Goodfellas and The Sopranos.
The Godfather wasn't just a movie, it was like a blueprint for the whole gangster genre.
Yeah.
Visually, thematically, it set the standard. You can see its influence everywhere, even today.
And the dialogue, it's so iconic. I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse. Leave the gun, take the cannoli. Those lines are part of our culture now.
It shows you how powerful the film is. The characters, the lines, the images, they stuck with us. They're part of who we are.
Yeah, and the source ends with a really thought-provoking line. The Godfather teaches us that power comes at a price, and that sometimes the people who seek to escape their destiny are the ones most doomed to fulfill it.
It's true. Even when you try to fight fate, sometimes it wins. Michael's story is a warning. Power corrupts, violence breeds violence. It's a cycle that's hard to break.
It makes you wonder, what if Michael had made different choices? Could he have stopped that cycle, the violence that ruined him?
That's the question that sticks with you. Did Michael really have a choice? Or was he always going to end up as the Godfather? It's what makes the film so powerful. It keeps you thinking.
It really makes you think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, could he have gotten away? Could he have broken free? Or was he always meant to be the Godfather?
It's one of those questions that just stays with you. If you'd never come back from Sicily, could he have found peace? Or was it just fate? It really makes you think The Godfather does.
It does, for sure. We've covered a lot today. The whole Shakespeare thing, those big themes, the amazing acting, Coppola, and how much the film still matters today. It's a lot.
And we've just scratched the surface. The Godfather, you can watch it 100 times and you'll still find something new. New details, new layers. It's a masterpiece, plain and simple.
Yeah, you've definitely got me wanting to watch it again. Pay more attention to those oranges, all the little things we talked about.
That's what makes it so great. You finish the movie, but it stays with you. Makes you think about power, family, fate, all that in your own life.
Totally agree. So, after all this, what really stood out to you about The Godfather? Anything that really surprised you?
For me, it's how the film can be huge, this epic story, but also really personal at the same time. It's about power, corruption, but it's also about a family, the choices they make. It's both.
Yeah, and the act just amazing. Brando, Pacino, they create these characters that everyone knows, and the rest of the cast, fantastic.
It's a film where everything works perfectly. The writing, the directing, the acting, the music, it all fits together. Something really special.
Well said. Well, we've given everyone a lot to think about today, but we always like to leave you with one last thought. What if he never came back from Sicily? Could he have found peace? Or was his destiny already set?
No easy answer to that one, but it's the right question to ask. That's what makes a film great.
Yeah.
It leaves you with questions, makes you think critically, really engage with it.
Exactly. And we want to hear your thoughts. Head over to our social media, tell us what you think, your favorite moments, any questions you still have, and hey, maybe it's time for a Godfather rewatch.
There's always something new to see.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into The Godfather. Until next time.